Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and today I'm here with Tom Salvemini, who is he's a debut author, and he writes children's books. And Tom, why don't you tell us about your new debut book?
Well, the first book that I finally brought to publication is called Band of Gorillas. And basically, what it is it's a rhyming picture book using couplets, and it educates children on the very unique names that we give to animal groups. For example, a group of pandas is called an embarrassment, and I've always found that very interesting.
That is very interesting. Can you give us a couple more?
Yeah, a conspiracy of lemurs, uh, a squadron of pelicans, and a basket of alligators.
And those
Basket
are
of crocodiles, excuse me. I almost made that mistake in my book.
and those are the actual names that they give.
Yeah. I think the first time I ever heard, I saw a movie many years ago, and the name of the movie was Murder of Crows.
Yes,
Inappropriate for a book, but then I started to realize that we give these animal groups different names, and I found that very intriguing.
that is very it's very interesting. And I think it's great for kids to learn those group names. And I think it's wonderful. So, what do you think would draw readers to these kinds of books?
Well, being an elementary teacher for 25 years, one of the most important things to me is the illustrations. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of money looking for just the right illustrator to bring my thoughts and my perceptions of what the illustrations should look like, to bring them to life. And interestingly, I hired a gentleman out of Chicago, named Jason Slater, and we were talking back and forth. And I said, I'd really like the cover of the book to be a rock group of gorillas, band of gorillas. And he sent me a sketch, and it was literally just like the picture I had in my mind. And I couldn't believe it. It was almost like he had somehow, had done a mind meld on me and got it exactly. So I knew that I had to hire him.
That is incredible. So you're self-published.
Yes.
That's it's totally different to be self-published than it is to be regularly published.
Mhm.
So, what was the biggest challenge that you had in self-publishing?
I think the biggest challenge for me was having absolutely no experience about how to navigate the process. How to find an illustrator, how to find a publisher, how to have a book published. And so I took a sabbatical from my third grade teaching position in Westboro and spent a ton of time in the public libraries, and then talking to any local artist or illustrator that would or a writer that would give me 20 minutes of their time. And I learned a lot about the difference between using a publisher and self-publishing.
So what kind of research did you have to do when you were writing this
when I
book?
when I did this, and another funny story, but when I was in the libraries, I would look at book size, and I would look at page layout, and I would look at the types of illustrators that were out there. And I knew that I wanted somebody that could bring humor to my illustrations as well as just good depictions. But I spent so much time in the Shrewsbury Library in the children's section. The librarian actually came up to me and asked me to leave, thinking that I was probably a pedophile or something. And I had to explain to her that I was an elementary teacher and I was doing research for a children's book, and I was allowed to stay. So,
So again, what kind of research did you actually have to do?
well, I did most of my research about the animal group names simply on the internet, and there's all kinds of sites that list the different names we give to animal groups. The interesting thing that I found is many of the animal groups have multiple names that you can use. And so I took a little bit of literary license, and I chose the group of the name that would best fit the flow of my story or would be best subjected to an illustration. Some things you just can't illustrate well. And I tried to give my illustrator as many options as possible.
So why Band of Gorillas is your title?
Why? I thought
Yeah.
that I just everybody's into rock and roll, one way or another. And I just thought
Okay.
the cover and it really is an eye catcher, I think. Of all the illustrations that were done, it was one of my favorites anyways, but I just thought that it really kind of was an eye catcher.
So, what was the inspiration actually for the book, for Band of Gorillas?
To make a very long story short, I have a gentleman that comes to my classroom every year, and I've been thinking about writing children's books, oh my God, for probably 30 years. And this gentleman came to my classroom to talk about perseverance in life and stepping out of your comfort zone and doing things that you think are hard to do and never giving up. And the gentleman's a skydiver and a scuba diver, and he drives a Maserati. And when he comes in to talk to my kids, he's a quadriplegic. And when he wheels in his wheelchair, it's very shocking to my kids, but it's also a great learning experience. And he has been in my classroom for probably 10 years. And about 7 years ago, one day I'd heard his spiel many times. And finally, I was really listening. And I was sitting in the bathroom thinking, what of the things in life that I have not done, or I've been, not confident enough to attempt or not willing to see through. And writing children's books was one of them. So the very next year I took the sabbatical and got myself going. But interestingly, and we can talk more about it, is my second book is about my friend David, the quadriplegic who came to my classroom for so many years.
Wow. Okay. So which of the characters, I guess, or groups of characters was your favorite?
Um, that's really hard. I would have to say a conspiracy of lemurs, or possibly a basket of crocodiles, because I just thought that the illustrations were so well done.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good.
And they're not characters in the sense of a story, when it's poetry. So it's a little different. They don't have a lot of depth that you might get in a story. So
Right, right. That's true. Okay, and now you mentioned that you have your second book
yes.
already. What else can we expect from you?
Are you asking me about the second book, or hopefully beyond that?
Well, both.
Oh, well, my second book is called Conceivable, and it's about my friend David, the quadriplegic. And when he was in college, he dove into a river that was shallow and broke his neck. And interestingly enough, his license plate is phonetically spelled conceivable. And he believes that everything in life is conceivable. So the story is a circle story, and it starts out with him skydiving out of an airplane. And then the whole process of him coming to my classroom and talking to my kids about how he functions in life and how his mindset allows him to do all these great things. And then the book ends with me actually skydiving, because he inspired me to try something I was scared to death to do. So that's going to hopefully be out in 10 months. It's going to be illustrated by a man named Ed Turner in Westboro, where I taught. So I'm very excited about that. And the other thing that we're working on is, instead of doing the normal book launch, we want to do a fundraiser gala book launch with Spinal Cord Injury of Boston. So we thought that would be a really great way to, raise money for a good cause, but to also, have a really exciting book launch. So at that point, I'll have 2 books under my belt, and be a great way to get my name out,
That's great.
as well as help people. So,
And anything beyond that?
well, when I took the year off, I also did all the research for a book on one of my childhood heroes, which was Meadowlark Lemon of the Harlem Globetrotters. I wrote a book that I haven't fine-tuned called the Clownfish and the Anemone, kind of a sea fairy tale. And I think there was one other book in there, but right now I'm not going to be able to get it, bring it to mind. But these are all stories that I'd really have to, go back and revise and edit and work on and fine-tune them. So,
Great.
but,
Wow.
but Annie, when you self-publish, you're also self-financing. So it's not like you can just pump out a book a year or anything. You've got to have the money to do it. And as you know, it's not cheap.
Exactly. Now, but have you sent your books to regular publishers?
Actually, a very kind gentleman who you may know, named Ralph Mazziello, a very famous children's book author.
Yep.
We did talk, and when we were talking, I showed him my book, and he goes, "Wow," he goes, "that actually looks really great. Can you send it to me?" So I sent him Band of Gorillas, and I sent him a copy of my manuscript for Conceivable, and he did take them to his publisher. Of course, I've heard nothing, which is, to be
Typical.
understood. And another author named Kate Messner reached out,
Yep.
and somehow she had gotten a copy and had really enjoyed the book. So that's as far as I've gotten with publishers, to be honest. And I'm also the kind of person that does not want to give up any of my rights. Like, I want to pick my illustrator. I don't want somebody to do it for me. And I don't know how true it is, but they said if you get with a publisher, they do all the work, but they also pretty much
Mhm.
get all the money too. So I don't know how I feel about using a publisher should that opportunity ever arise.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's quite a difference there.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have questions about you as a writer. What's
Okay.
your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Um, I like to try to be creative. In my classroom, I was always trying to develop and design lessons that not only involve me being creative, but giving my students and my kids an opportunity to display their creativity. We did a lot of poster projects. I did a lot of writing in my classroom, and I actually had one of my students many years ago actually self-publish, a book that she had done in the classroom. So she was, she was a children's book author long before I was. And she did it as a fourth grader. I think a year after she was with me. Um, we had put little books together, and her parents encouraged her to self-publish it, and she did. But I do, as you probably know, inspiration sometimes comes at the oddest times. And I always, when I wrote weekly newsletters to my families, I always tried to be creative, tried to be funny, and tried to really hold their attention so that the information that I had to share that they would actually read. So reading comes
Uh-huh.
writing comes in all, as you know, all forms, and you just never know when the inspiration hits.
Hmm. Now, are you still teaching?
No, I actually retired 2 years ago, and I've been pretty much focusing on writing right now and my family.
Wonderful. Okay, so what do you consider the most challenging part of the whole writing process?
Overcoming the inner voice that says you're not going to be good enough. And my wife is a professional coach. She calls them gremlins. That we all have these gremlins that, that inner voice that tells us, what, you'll never produce anything good or anything like that. And one thing that I did learn is my time in the public libraries, as you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of children's books, there's a lot of pedestrian books out there that you look at and you go, you know what, I could at least do this much. And I
Mhm.
think that was, for me, was a stumbling block that I had to get over, that I'm just going to do my best, and wherever the chips fall and whatever is the end product, I'm going to do my best to produce my best possible book. So I think it was getting into the right mindset and being confident.
Hmm. Okay. So what has been your favorite adventure as a writer?
Um, oh, geez, that's a tough one. I guess I would have to say I did my first book launch at Tatnick Books in Westboro, and I actually talked for 20 minutes about the process to a crowd of about 40 or 50 people. And I could talk to third graders all day long, but talking to adults and stuff like that, it was a unique experience for me, and it was so very humbling for somebody to ask me to sign their book. I have a hard time kind of getting over that aspect of things. But that was a unique experience.
Okay. So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
I think, as I tell everybody, and as you and I have talked a little bit by email, uh, just go for it.
Hmm.
Produce something, it may not be a bestseller, but produce something and work on it. And if you're not happy with it, produce something else. And I find myself, anything I write, whether it's a greeting card, a newsletter at school, a note to a friend, I always try to write something very creative, and to be funny, because humor always catches people's attention. It worked very well in my third grade classroom. Always tried to keep things light and humorous.
Mhm. Do you have to revise things a lot?
I do, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. In my first book, there wasn't a lot of revision because there are 2 lines of poetry, the pages.
Yeah.
So the rhyme pattern was very simple. But in my second book, Conceivable, yeah, I still am going back to it constantly, looking at it, asking people to read it. Does it sound clear? Are you understanding, the storyline? But I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because at some point you've got to give it up.
Mhm. Right. So, is there any other advice that you would like to share with other writers?
Just really, and I think I've kind of covered this, but just try it. You never know, there's nothing lost in trying. Just give it your best shot, go for it. Even if Band of Gorillas didn't sell 1 copy, I was very happy going through the process, working with an illustrator, and going, taking the project from beginning to end. I think there's good value in that.
Right. And for people who are trying to sell their work to publishers, I mean, you hear all these stories about so many rejections, and then all you need is one.
Yeah.
All you need is one acceptance.
Well, I
Yeah.
think you probably more than anybody know the story of Dr. Seuss, that he took his Cat in the Hat to something like 22 publishers and was turned down 22 times, and it was the 23rd publisher that sold millions and millions of copies. So
Yeah.
that's, and I'm convinced. I talked with my wife last night. It's just, for the book to go anywhere, first of all, it has to be a good book, but you just never know. The book has to get in the hands somehow, or has to be read by the right person.
Yes.
Just the right person that reads it, that has the contacts, or is a publisher, or somebody that is in the game and says, you know what, this is a book that's going somewhere. And that's okay if that's not mine. I'm good with that. I mean, I'm just happy with what I did.
Right. So, are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to other authors that might have helped you with your work?
Yeah, a gentleman named Scott Nelson is a local children's book author, I believe out of Northborough, graciously gave me an hour of his time one afternoon. I'm gonna forget the name now, but there's a group down in I think Sharon or Shirley. I can't think of the Writer's Loft.
I just left.
I went once or twice down there to listen to people reading their manuscripts, and I think I shared Conceivable. Unfortunately, the day that I shared it, I was in with picture book people, so mine was more a little bit older, and they were all picture book people. But just getting to know people and hearing their stories as well is also a benefit.
Okay. Now, I have questions about you as a person.
Sure.
Okay. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Oh boy. um. I guess the one thing I could say is I restore vintage pinball machines, and I've restored over 120 pinball machines, and I buy them, sell them, keep them, donate them to church youth groups. That would probably be one thing that a lot of people don't know about me. Um, I guess that's all I can say right off the top of my head.
That's pretty good. I love it.
And that's how I actually sold my 6 best machines to fund the illustration work for my first book. So, there was a method to the madness.
Uh-huh. Great. So, what is or are your passions when you're not writing?
Sure.
And how do you make time for the things that you love?
When I was teaching, almost impossible. That's why I took a 1 year sabbatical from my position to make time. Now I have a little more time. My wife and I were avid scuba divers. That's kind of weaned off a little bit as we've gotten busier. But we love to hike and love to scuba dive. Been skydiving a few times. And like I said, I spend a lot of time restoring pinball machines because it's something I can do right in the house. I just go down to my workshop and I can spend a couple of hours down there working on machines.
Wow. Okay. So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing or editing?
It could be the kitchen countertop. It could be the dining room table. I don't really have a place that I do my best writing. I spent a lot of time writing and researching in the libraries where it was quiet, but I don't necessarily need quiet. I often will have the TV on just for white noise behind me. It just, when the inspiration hits, you sit down and start scratching things out on the piece of on the back of a book, anywhere that you get those thoughts down while you have them.
Okay, you said you don't necessarily need silence, but if you listen to music while you're writing or editing, what kind of music would you listen to?
Oh, geez. My musical tastes run the gamut. So I usually just have some kind of rock or alternative rock or soft rock or some kind of rock and roll music on.
Okay, and would it have so it would probably have lyrics to it.
Yes, it would. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you can actually write when you're listening to lyrics?
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it's white noise. I'm not,
Wow.
sometimes I can have the TV on and not know a thing of what's going on, but for whatever reason, you know,
That's amazing. Most people can't, if they have lyrics, it's like it's kind of a conflict there.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
interesting.
yeah. And my first book, because it was a rhyming picture book, it didn't take an overly strong concentration. You know what I mean? It was just coming up
Mhm.
with a rhyme pattern and putting together the flow of the story.
Okay. And when you're writing or editing, do you need to have specific food or drink with you?
No, because I eat 24/7. No, I don't have any particular, when I'm writing, whatever's going on at the time is what's happening. I don't look for a space usually, or I don't look for a specific food or noise or anything. Just sit down wherever it's comfortable and get to it.
Okay. And writers often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them through their work. And do you have any, and do they help or hinder you?
We have two cats and they would pretty much hinder me. They love affection and they're constantly, up in your face. And I would probably say for me, they would hinder me.
Okay. I guess my next question, you've only had one book out, so, and I know the answer to that one for that book, but for your future books, how important do you think the New England setting is going to be for your other books, for your newest books?
I would have to say not really important, but the second story, Conceivable, pretty much took place in my third grade classroom in Westboro. So I guess the setting there would be a little important, but I haven't really done anything with the surrounding um, you know, region at all.
Okay. Um, and now I just have two more questions for you. Um, And one is, where can people find your book? Aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I always have to put a plug for Annie's. You can get Tom's book at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. So where else can people find your book?
Yeah, I would say definitely Annie's. But it is available at Barnes and Noble. It's available at Tatnick Bookseller in Westboro. You can get it on Amazon. It's listed on Amazon and Walmart's website. The other thing is I'll be doing I'll be doing another book signing at Barnes and Noble on October 28th at 11 o'clock in the morning. And then on December 9th, I'll be back at Tatnick Books. So um, I don't see the value, but if should you want the book signed by the author, I'm more than happy to do it. And I always try to make sure that I spell my last name right.
Okay, sounds great. My last question for you is how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Well, that's a part that I'm kind of putting the infrastructure into place right now. So I would have to say the best place is Facebook. We have a presence on Facebook, but that's about as far as it goes right now. So we are working on that. We'll probably try to get on Instagram and stuff like that. But right now, Facebook would be the place to.
Okay, and your Facebook name is?
Well, let me give you my website. That would probably be better. That was the other thing too. I do have a website. It's www.tomsalvemini.com. So www.tomsalvemini.com.
Okay.
That's in Band of Gorillas for. So if you get that book, you'll have my website.
All right, sounds great. Well, thank you very much, Tom, and hopefully we'll be seeing you at Annie's
Yes.
sometime in the future.